There's a hidden chapter in Hollywood's golden age, one that doesn't get told enough. Long before CGI battles and choreographed wire-fu, there were real fighters behind the camera. Not just actors, but warriors. Men who didn't just play tough, they were tough. They trained in silence, mastered ancient arts, and brought raw, physical combat to the screen in a time when most action was just swinging fists and throwing punches. These were the pioneers, the ones who studied kung fu, karate, judo, and more, long before martial arts became mainstream in Western cinema. From the smoky backlots of the 1930s to the hard-hitting fight scenes of the 1970s, these actors moved with purpose. Their eyes sharp, their bodies disciplined. Some were trained by legends. Others became legends. They didn't rely on stunt doubles. Their skill was real, and it showed. When they struck, you felt it. When they moved, the screen followed. And behind their stories lies a trail of philosophy, danger, and deep respect for the martial way. This isn't just about fight scenes. It's about the spirit behind them, the fire in their training, the code they lived by. Many names have faded with time, but not these. In this video, we dive into 9 of the most iconic, skilled, and underrated martial arts masters in classic Hollywood. Some you know, some you've never heard of, but all of them could fight. And by the end, you'll never look at old Hollywood the same way again. Bruce Lee, the man who moved faster than thought. In the quiet corners of a film set, when the camera wasn't rolling and the crew had stepped away, Bruce Lee would still be in motion, practicing, thinking, testing his own limits. He believed that movement was life, and that stillness was just a challenge waiting to be broken. He wasn't just an actor. He wasn't even just a martial artist. Bruce Lee was a force of nature compacted into flesh and bone, and for a brief, brilliant moment in time, the world tried to keep up with him. Born between two cultures, shaped by tradition and rebellion, Lee didn't walk into Hollywood, he punched through it. At a time when the industry wasn't ready for someone like him, he didn't wait for permission. He brought with him not just skill, but a philosophy. Every motion meant something. Every fight scene was a form of expression. While others were playing characters, Bruce was showing truth. He studied Wing Chun under the legendary Ip Man, but he didn't stop there. He pulled from fencing, boxing, street fights, and silence. What emerged was something the world had never seen. Jeet Kune Do, a style with no style, shaped by instinct stripped of ego. In Enter the Dragon, his eyes told the story before his fists ever moved. In The Way of the Dragon, he didn't just fight Chuck Norris, he out-thought him. Precision over power, clarity over chaos. Bruce Lee didn't just change martial arts in film. He changed the rhythm of action itself. He was a comet, fast, bright, unforgettable. And though his time was short, the trail he left behind still glows across generations. This was the man who moved faster than thought and slowed time for everyone watching. Chuck Norris, the silent storm. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to pose. Chuck Norris walked onto the screen with the calm of a man who had already fought his battles and won. There was no flash, no gimmick. Just the weight of someone who had trained longer, fought harder, and stood taller because of it. Before Hollywood ever knew his name, Chuck Norris was already a world champion. Karate wasn't a costume he put on for the camera. It was in his bones. He was one of the first Americans to truly master it, and more importantly, to teach it with humility. His movements weren't just sharp, they were earned. Every strike backed by thousands of hours, alone in a dojo, working when no one was watching. When he stepped into Way of the Dragon, opposite Bruce Lee, the world expected him to be outshined. But he didn't play the villain. He played the mirror, the equal. Their battle was more than choreography. It was a meeting of philosophies. Strength versus speed. Silence versus fire. Both walked away immortal. Norris brought something different to martial arts cinema, discipline without ego. A stillness that spoke louder than any scream. While others relied on theatrics, he let his technique do the talking. Clean, direct, no wasted motion, just focus, timing, and explosive control. Off-screen, he was a teacher, a mentor, and a builder of schools, a man who believed martial arts could shape character as much as it could break boards. In an era of noise, Chuck Norris was the quiet one. And like any true storm, the silence before he struck was the part you remembered most. Jim Kelly, the cool in combat. Before he even raised a fist, Jim Kelly had already won the room. The way he stood, the way he moved, there was rhythm in his silence and confidence in his calm. He brought something to martial arts cinema that no one else had, not just power, not just skill, but swagger. Real, unshakable, earned swagger. A national karate champion turned actor, almost by chance, Kelly didn't follow the usual script. He carved his own. When Enter the Dragon called, he answered, stepping into history with a few sharp lines and even sharper moves. And when Bruce Lee stood beside him, the chemistry didn't need dialogue. Two masters, two energies, one purpose. What made Jim Kelly different wasn't just his technique, it was how he carried it. His style blended explosive kicks with effortless motion. It was as if jazz had taken the form of a martial artist. He didn't just strike, he danced through fights, turning each scene into a performance of balance, speed, and timing. But Kelly wasn't just a flash in the frame. He stood for something. At a time when Hollywood rarely made room for black heroes, he broke in anyway, afro high, fists ready, and pride intact. He didn't shout. He didn't ask. He simply showed up, and the screen took notice. With films like Black Belt Jones and 3 the Hard Way, he expanded the idea of what a martial arts star could look like, and more importantly, how one could move. Jim Kelly didn't just bring the fight. He brought the cool, the kind that can't be taught, the kind that lands before the punch ever does. David Carradine, the monk who walked into prime time. He didn't run. He wandered. Through deserts, ghost towns, saloons, and sound stages, David Carradine drifted across screens like a question no one knew how to answer. His voice was soft, his hands open, but behind that quiet, there was something watching, something waiting. In the 1970s, Kung Fu wasn't just a TV show. It was a whisper in the storm, a western filled not with gunslingers, but with philosophy. And at its center was Carradine, playing Kwai Chong Caine, a half-Chinese, half-American Shaolin monk with a flute in one hand and centuries of tradition in the other. Carradine was not a trained martial artist when a role found him. But the strange thing is, that didn't matter. Because what he brought wasn't the violence. It was the stillness, the presence. He moved like someone who had already made peace with the outcome. Every fight was a lesson. Every silence was heavier than speech. And over time, something changed. The role began to shape the man. Carradine studied Tai Chi, he sought out knowledge. He followed the path he had once only pretended to walk. What began as acting became something closer to searching. Not for power, but for balance. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. But David Carradine gave martial arts a new shape on American screens, one shaped not by fists, but by thought. He made stillness cinematic. He made restraint feel dangerous. And in that still desert wind, you could almost hear it, the soft steps of a warrior who never needed to raise his voice. Toshiro Mifune, the storm with a sword. He didn't just act. He commanded. When Toshiro Mifune stepped into a frame, something changed. The silence thickened, the air shifted. He could stand still, yet you'd swear the ground beneath him was shaking. That's what true power looks like, unspoken, unforced, undeniable. Mifune wasn't from Hollywood, but Hollywood never stopped chasing him. He rose from the heart of Japanese cinema, carving his legend through the films of Akira Kurosawa, the director who saw in him not just a man, but a force. Together, they created a new kind of warrior, rugged, flawed, deeply human, yet larger than life. He trained not in fancy dojos, but through performance, sweat, and fierce discipline. His swordplay in Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, and Throne of Blood was terrifying in its precision, not because it was graceful, but because it felt real. He fought like a man who had already seen the end, wild, relentless, calculated. Every slash carried weight. Every step was intention. Mifune was more than an actor with a blade. He was a symbol of honor, rage, control, and chaos all at once. His characters didn't deliver one-liners. They delivered presence. You couldn't look away. Even Hollywood tough guys took note. Many borrowed from him. Few could match him. He never became a Hollywood regular. He didn't need to. One film, one frame, that was enough. Mifune didn't chase the world. He made the world come to him. And when he stood, sword low, eyes fixed on the horizon, you understood. This was not a man playing samurai. This was the storm, and the sword, and the silence that comes after. Sonny Chiba, the blade with bare hands. Some fighters cut with swords. Sonny Chiba didn't need one. His hands were enough. Calloused, fast, unforgiving, they spoke a language that didn't need subtitles. When he hit, it wasn't a stunt. It was a warning. Long before Hollywood figured out that martial arts could be brutal, Chiba had already broken the rules. He wasn't polished like Bruce Lee or smooth like Jim Kelly. He was rough, unpredictable. He didn't flow, he exploded. And when the Street Fighter hit screens in 1974, audiences weren't just watching a new kind of action hero, they were bracing for impact. Chiba was the real deal, a black belt in Kyokushin karate, judo, ninjutsu, and more. He didn't play fighters. He was one. Everything about him, from the way he breathed to the way he growled through punches, felt lived in, like violence had muscle memory. His fight scenes didn't dance. They cracked. Bones snapped, sweat flew, and there was no clean finish. Chiba's characters weren't moral warriors. They were survivors. Fighters who did what they had to, no apologies, no mercy. And yet, behind the fury, there was craft. Discipline. Years of real training poured into every frame. He made martial arts feel dangerous again, not pretty, not perfect, but raw. It was power without polish, rage without chaos. Hollywood eventually took notice. Quentin Tarantino called him a god. Action stars today still echo his intensity, even if they don't know it. Sonny Chiba didn't just bring martial arts to film. He dragged it into the gutter, gave it teeth, and let it off the leash. James Coburn, the Hollywood samurai. He never looked like a fighter. He didn't need to. James Coburn was the kind of man who could cut through a room just by walking into it. Tall, lean, with a voice like gravel and a gaze that didn't blink, he was cool before cool had a name. But behind that quiet, steel charm lived a student. A thinker. A warrior in disguise. Coburn didn't just admire martial arts, he lived them. Not on the screen, but in his personal life. And not from a distance. He trained directly under Bruce Lee, long before the world knew what that meant. In his Bel Air backyard, alongside other dedicated students like Steve McQueen, Coburn absorbed the teachings of Jeet Kune Do, not just the strikes, but the philosophy. He wasn't chasing roles. He was chasing understanding. In films like Our Man Flint or The Magnificent Seven, he didn't throw punches like a martial arts star. But his movements had precision, timing, control. There was a rhythm to him, lean and calculated. He could do more with a glance than most could do with a monologue. What set Coburn apart was his depth. He wasn't interested in martial arts as spectacle. He saw it as a tool for life, clarity through motion, simplicity through discipline. And while others chased the spotlight, he stayed in the shadows, learning. To many, James Coburn was just another silver screen gunslinger. But beneath the suit and smirk, there was a student of the dragon, and a Hollywood samurai whose sharpest weapon was always his mind. Steve McQueen, the fighter behind the wheel. He didn't walk. He moved, like a man with no time to waste. Steve McQueen didn't ask questions. He acted fast and first. They called him the King of Cool, but underneath the denim jackets and motorcycle grease was something deeper. A restlessness, a precision, a fire that could burn or focus depending on the moment. Most knew him for the chase scenes. The cars, the motorcycles, the glare that made words unnecessary. But few knew what he was doing when the engines cooled and the lights went down. Steve McQueen was training, not for a role, but for himself. And his teacher was Bruce Lee. In quiet backyards and private dojos, McQueen studied the craft the world hadn't yet caught up with. Jeet Kune Do wasn't about looking good. It was about stripping away ego, reacting in real time, and being honest with your body. That appealed to McQueen. He didn't like rules. He liked results. He may never have starred in a martial arts film, but the training changed him. You could see it in the way he moved, measured, explosive, coiled like a spring. You could see it in the fights he didn't take, the words he didn't say. A man like McQueen didn't need a stage to prove anything. He just was. He carried martial discipline into everything, racing, acting, living on the edge. And in that tension between chaos and control, McQueen found his rhythm. He didn't wear a belt. He didn't chase belts. But make no mistake, Steve McQueen was a fighter. One of the fiercest the screen never saw coming. Burt Lancaster, the acrobat with a sword. Before fight scenes had choreography, before stunts had safety wires, before action had rules, there was Burt Lancaster. He didn't act like a hero. He moved like one. Every leap, every lunge, every grin mid-sword fight wasn't just for show, it was real. He was a performer in the oldest sense, part athlete, part artist, part daredevil. Born into a rough New York neighborhood and raised in the air above the crowd, literally, as a circus acrobat, Lancaster's foundation wasn't drama school. It was gravity. He understood motion with a rare, instinctive brilliance. When he swung from ropes in the Crimson Pirate or balanced on moving trains in the train, it wasn't a double. It was him. His body knew how to tell a story. He brought grace to violence, making physical action feel like poetry in flight. He didn't throw punches like a brawler. He carved the air like a dancer. And while he never trained in kung fu or karate, his command of physical storytelling made him a martial artist in spirit. He studied fencing, gymnastics, boxing, anything that demanded precision and danger. He made movement mean something. In an age of smoke and mirrors, Lancaster was the real thing. Audiences didn't just watch him, they held their breath. Because with him, the risk was real. You saw it in his eyes, in the sweat, in the fluid control that only comes from decades of mastery. He made classic Hollywood swashbuckle with purpose. He turned action into art. And when he moved, the camera had no choice but to follow. Did we get it right? Before we go any further, drop a comment below and let us know. Who do you think were the greatest martial arts fighters in classic Hollywood? Did we miss someone you believe deserves a place among these legends? Let's hear it. The conversation starts with you. Because this isn't just a list, it's a tribute. A reminder of a time when every punch had purpose, every movement had meaning, and every fighter brought more than skill, they brought soul. From Bruce Lee's lightning speed to Steve McQueen's silent edge, from Jim Kelly's rhythm to Sonny Chiba's raw energy, these were men who embodied the fight. Not for glory, not for fame, but because it was part of them. They weren't superheroes. They were disciplined, relentless, often misunderstood, and always unforgettable. Their legacies stretch beyond their films, living on in the movements of every actor, stunt performer, and martial artist who followed. If you felt something watching this, if one of these names sparked a memory or introduced you to someone new, give us a like. Hit subscribe. This channel's about honoring the stories that shape the screen, one legend at a time. And don't forget, the comments are open. That's where new names rise. That's where hidden masters are remembered. Because sometimes the most powerful fighters are the ones we almost forget.